idea remained the same. One has to understand the four basic energetic systems of our physical universe. A little bit of theory here. I'm not going to get into math and highly involved because this is not intended to be a scientific dissertation, but a more popular presentation of the ideas of what was going on. I'm sure everybody has heard about electric fields, both static and, of course, current flow as the AC system we use today and have used since before the turn of the 20th century. There are electric fields, of course there are magnetic fields, and everybody I'm sure has heard about magnetic fields, but I'm quite sure very few people ever heard about a gravity field, because Sir Isaac Newton's idea when the apple hit him on the head, as per the stories of yore, that he propounded the theory of gravity in which all matter had an attraction for all other matter, and the mass of the planet determined the strength of the gravitic field. Happens to be incorrect. But there's not much in the way of outside literature published in the open domain which indicates, other than the speculative ideas, that gravity is a field, an external field around the body like the Earth or any other object. And it's extremely important that when I know the idea of the gravity field, because this is what we were using to create a means of access to the time field. Now that again is another new idea, because not many people outside of the, let's say, the hardcore scientific field, the hardcore scientific community, really understand that time is not an illusion, but is an actual fact in the form of a field. Without a blackboard and such, I cannot give you much of an idea what I'm talking about, but I'll attempt to do this, shall we say, off the cuff without actual physical representation. The gravity field, the electric field, and the magnetic field are all interlocked. If you consider or mentally look at an idea of, let's say, a triangle, an equilateral triangle of some size, point up, you can assign it in any way you wish, but at the 3 points, the 3 apexes of this equilateral triangle, one will be E for electric field, one will be H for the magnetic field, and the other will be G for gravitic field. If you interconnect these fields by electronics and electronic means, and that takes a great deal of math, and it took many years to understand how to do it, but this is what Tesla came up with, and of course the rest of the people at the Institute. You set up electronics and electronic means to properly interact with these three fields, you then access automatically the time field. When you access the time field, and this of course is in a small localized area, depending upon how much power you put into this, you access it and you can manipulate the time field within a small, or perhaps not quite so small, area for effects which are local. If you visualize a donut, this would be the easiest way to do it. A toroid, but let's say a donut, which everybody I think has seen, but a toroidal structure resembling a donut. This thing is a closed circuit. Time is a closed loop. This is very advanced math, very vast concepts, in which there is quite literally no beginning and no ending. There is a point which one can say is plus and minus infinity. This is a mathematical concept, which perhaps doesn't have any direct feeling in reality. But this is a concept. There is a point, you might say, is the beginning and the ending, the alpha and the omega. And you can go through that point, but we're not there. We're at some point in the time field, and in the terms of this torus or donut, if one describes a line around the edge, such as a full circumferential line, enclosing the torus, enclosing this donut, this is the reality line of time as we understand it, time being three vectors, but the first vector, T1, the so-called fourth dimension, is time as we know it, time as we measure it with a clock, as we can measure it astronomically by the movement and the position of the stars. This is fairly easy to grasp. Time also has another aspect, another vector called T2, which is at right angles with the first. Now, if the time we understand and measure is along the edges of this torus, or this donut, if you look at the donut as a three-dimensional object, you can describe a certain amount of circumferential rotation around it. You can literally trace around the donut fully around one edge, and as you go, if it's a helix, you go around the whole donut describing it. This is T2. It is at right angles to the linear flow. And this right angle coil, if you will, is the second vector of time. We don't measure that, but it is the one which controls T1. Now what we were doing, we're speaking now theoretically, is accessing the time field, and in order to access time itself, if I use that term, you have to go one order higher in order to affect everything that's below it. Going one order higher is when you go to T2 and you affect T2, and therefore you can control within that limited area that you're working with, because the force of the electronics and the artificial field you create doesn't go through the whole Earth and through the whole universe. It's very much restricted, depending on how much power you have to affect the immediate area. This is one reason why they went to such high power in the early experiments, not the very first one Tesla did in 1940, but the subsequent ones, and that is the problem, which developed extremely high power, which became very destructive to the nervous systems of the sailors. But by doing this, you access time with the other three forces, and because of that, you can create a localized time field, and you can then play games with it. When I say games, again, I'm speaking mathematically and in theory. And what you can do, if you could create a field large enough to surround an object, whether it be this table or, say, a larger object like a ship, which is what, of course, we're concerned with, what you are doing is creating a field, literally a donut or torus field around that ship. The ship is within the hole, so to speak, but the fields are around it, and it affects time around that ship. Therefore, you can rotate the time field slightly as you go away from the line of reference, which we call time, or T1, T0 if you want to call it that. As you go away from that by creating a field which starts a rotation around the edge of this donut, you will get to a point at approximately 60 degrees rotation where light passes through the object. It is then invisible. The only reason it is invisible, it's still there. The only reason it's invisible is because there is no longer a reflection of energy. If you reflect light, the radar energy, you will get energy fed back to you. You will see it, a camera will record it, or the radar system, of course, will record a return of energy and create an image. No return, no image, i.e., it's invisible. That sounds very simple. It's really not.